to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the second and penultimate story of Series 5 of the Sarah Jane Adventures, The Curse of Clive Langer, written by Phil Ford and is directed by Ashley Way. This story is the penultimate story of not only Sarah Jane Series 5, but also the entire series, as Elizabeth Sladen sadly passed away in 2011, and making Series 5 the last thing that she ever did. But it's also noticeable for other reasons as well. This story tackles the idea of homelessness in a very realistic and almost frank way. And it's much more grounded in reality when it deals with this. And it's kind of astonishing that something would be put in Sarah Jane like this. And it is kind of sad that we go from Doctor Who, which is currently in the marathon on the 11th Doctor, where we have storylines that get dropped and all that, so they can tell later and they do the big bombastic storylines. And then you've got Sarah Jane telling a deeply personal story about homelessness and the effects of being outcasted is to someone, and it's a really important aspect on that. The story also won an award. It won the 2012 Writers Guide Best Children TV Script Award. So that is really cool. It's the second episode with Skye as a companion, Sarah Jane's new adoptive daughter, a flesh kind who was used as a weapon in the previous episode, Skye, in the previous story, Skye. But yeah, in terms of the general opinion though, I don't hear a lot of people talk about this one. From my understanding, a lot of people consider Series 5 to be not disappointment, not disappointment, but rather than that, for it to be the last series of Sarah Jane of Elizabeth Sladen. Of course, you couldn't help it because of a real world tragic event. But the main consensus is that Series 5 was when the show was starting to become a bit, what's the word? I don't want to say stale, but Series 5 wasn't as good as it should be in each story. With Skye, we've tackled it, and I really enjoyed Skye, and I honestly don't know what was the main issue with that. The Curse of Clive Langer is one of the best stories in the series. What? Series 5 has 2 hits so far. What is wrong with this? Why is everybody so negative towards Series 5? Obviously, we've got one more story left, but we have 2 rockin', and this one's not only good, this is up there with The Temptations of Sarah Jane, The Mark of Clive, The Mark of the Berserker, and Lost in Time, where it is highly regarded. In my mind, it's one of the best. Whether it's my favourite, I'm actually considering it as one of my favourite stories. It is so grounded, so realistic, maybe a bit depressing, but it really is a astonishing piece of television. In fact, the first thing that we see in the pre-credit sequence, Clive Lang is actually talking to the camera, which we later learn he's actually talking to another character. It takes place. This scene takes place later on in the episode, as he gives a monologue, as he's talking about this event, and he's in the rain, and right off the bat, this story has a much more realistic, a much more grounded look. Now, I always say this about Ashley Way's directing. He started off doing short mini episodes for series 2 of Doctor Who, and they were okay, a bit generic in terms of directing, but he did some, his work is decent. Then when he came into the Sarah Jane, he still continued that decent work, but more episodes he does, the better he becomes, and to the point where he's actually one of the best directors of the series, and this is a clear example of it. But what about the story itself? The story actually, the first half of part 1 is just mainly the setup of the narrative, or mainly the setup of Clyde Langer. This story, what I think I really enjoyed about the story is that it is so self-contained. The story sets up Clyde in a way it re-establishes his love for comic books, as you see him drawing, and he's a really good artist. He does this comic book called The Silver Bullet, a superhero character who protects Blood River City. Of course, Anthony Daniels didn't actually draw it, but in the context of the story, he's a good artist. And so, re-establishes that. You see his bond with his family, with his mother, with the rest of them, and this was important because this story could have easily started off with the main dilemma much earlier on in the episode, and then you could have more to do with that. But this episode goes, no, this could have been someone's first introduction to Sarah Jane. We need this story to be so that if it came out as a movie, if it was completely separated to Sarah Jane, it would still hold up as a great story. And so the story re-establishes, not re-sets up, but re-establishes these relationships, these quirks with Sarah Jane, Rani, and Clive, and as well with Sky. I like how, because this is Sky's second episode, and she is about to go to school, and we see her getting introduced to the school as Rani's father, who actually makes his last appearance in this story, is given like this induction. All of a sudden, it starts raining. It starts raining fish, which isn't actually unheard of. In real life, it has been known in certain areas of the world to rain fish. However, these are usually really small fish. These were pretty normal sized fish, which isn't natural. So it is a strange, possibly alien phenomenon. But Mr. Smith tracks down, it's like, hey, there's this Native American totem that has just recently been put in a nearby museum, and that has been known, according to legend, that if something bad was to happen, like a impending doom, like a warning, an omen would be, it starts raining fish. So Sarah Jane takes Rani, Clive, and Sky in with the museum. But I also like the establishment of character here. Clive is a really jokey character, and Sky, she's a bit new to everything, and she doesn't kind of realise, but she's still like, she has this fondness, this new eye. She's a very young Luke in a sense, although she's a bit more wide-eyed. She's not super smart, but she's fascinated by everything, and Clive kind of looks for her, and she kind of looks at him like an older brother, and Clive kind of really bonds with her extremely quickly, and like she's like, as he says, she's the only one who really understands his sense of humour. It's great. And so they go to the totem, and seemingly there's nothing about it. There seems to be no alien energy source coming out of it. Clive puts his finger on it, only for a thorn to cut him, and it was in his finger, and he gets it out, but there's still like a scar, a tissue damage on his finger. And clearly something sinister is going to go on with it. And so you see Clyde with his mother. They have a bit of banter about the fish and chocolate. Really nice to see Clive's mother, who I think also makes her last appearance in this story, who I believe she was introduced in Mark of the Berserker. Fantastic episode, by the way, highly recommend it. I just realised there's a lot of stories with Clive and curses. Clive-centric stories usually focus around curses. That is really bizarre. And the next day, Clive gets up, he has a normal day, and he talks to Sarah Jane until Sarah Jane mentions his name. And suddenly, she gets really aggressive towards Clive, and she even is like, how dare you, I hate the fact that you keep bullying my son. And you know what? I'm sick of it. You keep calling him nerd, geek, dork, but, and now I'm sick of it. I hate you, Clyde Langer. Get out of my house. Elizabeth Sladen playing Angry is absolutely terrifying. Sure, she might be a little bit playing it up a bit silly, a bit pantomime-y, not pantomime-y, but the idea of this such an innocent, lovable character like Sarah Jane just turning on you, and the confusion on Anthony Daniels' face. His acting in this story is phenomenal, and he really pulls off the more serious material of the story, as he doesn't understand what's going on. So he goes to meet with Rani next door and her father, and it's just like, Sarah Jane, she's just gone mad, and Rani's just like, oh, don't worry, I don't know what's the matter, surely nothing's wrong, Clive. And when she mentions the name, suddenly Rani's father and Rani start turning on her, with Rani's like, you gotta stay away from me, get away from me, I hate you. And Rani's father is like, not only do you have to stay away from my daughter, but I am kicking you out of the school. And Clive's just like, what? What's going on? And he doesn't understand. He's not too... He doesn't, it doesn't really... he kind of clicks that something's going on. At one point he calls his friend, he calls Luke, only for Luke to suddenly turn on his back, and he's left alone. We then get a reappearance of a character, a really minor character throughout the entire series of Sarah Jane. He's usually one of the pupils in the school. However, he's now out of the school, and him and Clive have this talk, and they seem to be getting along until he mentions his name, and of course he turns on Clive, and they start picking on him, and Clive kind of clicks, it's my name, something's happening to my name. All of these people say my name, and then they start turning on me. And we get a really intense action scene, chase scene, where these characters, these bully-like characters, are chasing after Clive because the curse has made them unrealistically aggressive towards Clive. And Clive just is completely, he has no hope in hell. I also forgot to establish that earlier on in the episode, there's a great moment with him and Sky, where just before they go into the museum, a homeless woman asks him for change, and he gives her change, and Sky's just like, why was she asking for change? And Clive is just like, oh, because she's, she's a scrub, she's a beggar or something. And then Sky is just like, so why did you give her money? To which Clive kind of feels, you could see like the sadness in his face, and he's just like, because it probably wasn't her fault. That gives you so much respect for Clive, and it makes it much more tragic what will happen to him. At one point he goes back to the museum to see if anybody in the place knows anything about the museum, about the about any curses, and the woman doesn't seem to remember his name, and so she's all right at the moment, and she's like, "Do you what? You actually believe your curse?" But after Sarah Jane makes a reappearance because because now the totem seems to be giving off some sort of alien energy which Mr. Smith had tracked. Oh no, sorry. She goes back to just to make a story and post it as a part of her journalism, because Sarah Jane is still a journalist. So it's more of a professional matter. And so when she sees Clive, she gets angry. She spills her name out, and when the curator looks at Clive and it's like, "Clive Langer, that's your name," she all of a sudden gets She gets aggressively angry at Clive, and Clive gets kicked out of the museum. And Clive's just had enough. He goes home, only to find his mother looking at letters with Clive's names on it. And Clive's mother turns on him and is sick, can't even look at him, and is basically chucking him out of the house, especially when the police arrive after Sarah Jane reported that Clive has been harassing her. And basically everyone is turned against Clive, and Clive is actually chucked out in the rain with nowhere to go. He's completely lost and isolated. This episode is such a bummer. It's such a really sad story. We also have Skye. She asks Sarah Jane about Clive, but Sarah Jane gets really aggressive, and Skye seemingly has no idea why everyone's getting so aggressive. She asks Rani at one point, and Rani is just like, I don't even want to hear that name. It's making me feel sick. And they get really aggressive. So seemingly Skye is unaffected by the so-called curse. I also really love, in terms of directing, when somebody is cursed, when they mention his name and they turn aggressive, we get a maximum close-up of their eye, and the name, which was written out earlier in the comic book, gets spelt out in their iris, as if to visually establish that there's this imprint, that there is this curse that gets bestowed upon people when that name is seen, heard, or said. And so that is just some really great visual storytelling right there. Ashley Way, that grittiness really comes in. I also really love that cliffhanger. I will say, actually, spoiler warning. It's not like a big monster turns up or anything like that. But I want to state, because if you're interested in this story, I say go watch now, because I feel like saying this cliffhanger might kind of spoil it. Essentially, Clive is at the bottom of the barrel. He's in the rain. He's crying. He's literally nowhere to go. He keeps knocking on doors and no one is letting him in. And then all of a sudden, that homeless girl that he gave money to earlier offers him a hand. And she's like, "Do you want to help?" And he takes her hand. It's one of the few cliffhangers in the entire franchise of Doctor Who which actually ends on a much more positive note. But a very similar thing happens in what's the one? It's not Power of the Daleks. What is that one with the? What's the second Patrick Troughton story called? Power of the Daleks, Evil of the Daleks. A similar thing happens with Evil of the Daleks, where the cliffhanger is actually like a happy note. It's not a cliffhanger in a sense of danger, but a cliffhanger of a happy note, as if to tell the story. Like, okay, we're actually getting somewhere nice here for a change. That's different. And what that does is, not only for this story, for this episode. The first episode leaves it on a great thing. So if you watch just episode 1 on its own, it's still well handled. But you just get so much bummed down by how much crap Clyde had to put through, that just any hope, just a small glimmer of hope of being helped by someone who had been suffered on the streets for seemingly years, that is just such an emotional little moment. As part 2, it's mainly Clive befriending this girl, and they seem to get interested in each other romantically as well. As she starts off, basically teaching him like how to live underneath the bridges. There's a homeless shelter where you can get food. She also teaches him in a way how to beg properly. Just stay in the corner and thing, whilst Clive wants to just go up to people and is like, excuse me, do you have any spare change? And she's like, no, you seem more like a dodgy car salesman than a beggar, and that puts people off. And Clive shows her his drawings, but not at first. There's one moment, probably the most important scene of the story, and I will admit, I did get teary-eyed at the moment because it's something I can personally relate to. Clive, they're basically in the cold. They have to go into a shelter. This woman basically tells everybody that Clive is cursed, and Clive is just like, you're right, I am cursed. There's a great moment as well that when Clive is trying to push her away because he knows what's going to happen, that she will betray him as well because of the curse. But she is just pushing on to him. She's such a nice person. She doesn't deserve to be this, to be homeless and use this establishment. You get a lot of shots of just homeless people, mainly in the background, just looking really depressed, really downbeat, and it's got such a realistic style. But there's this one moment which kind of has this brighter than life look to it, in which these scooters are about to hit the girl, but Clive pushes her out of the way, pulls her out of the way, and she's just like, see, Clive, you can never betray you. How can you be bad luck? You're my lucky charm. And they kind of have this bond, so they can't go back. They don't go back, and she actually stays with him to find shelter whilst it's raining. It's absolutely pouring down, and they have a laugh about the fish. And they're about to make a fire, however, it's not burning properly. And Clyde is just like, don't worry, I know exactly what we need. And he gets out his bag, and he's about to put the paper in the fire. However, he realizes the paper he's picked up is his comic book, the one that he wrote, he drew earlier on in the story. He looks at it, and then he puts it in the fire. He gives up his creative dream. At this point, he doesn't know any cure. He doesn't even know if this curse will ever be lifted. But he gives in his opportunity, his chance, his dream of becoming a comic book artist just to survive. That is such an emotionally and well resonated story, because that's happened to a lot of people, and not to get to this video really soppy, but I've had some situations where I had to give up my not dreams, that sounds really corny, my idea of what I would like to do, just to survive another day, to keep a meal going. It's, I think everybody's been there, everybody's struggled with it sometimes, whether it's just getting a job at the moment, so you take in a pretty a job which only pays you just to get by, and you can't get out of it, but you got to survive, so you got to take it, otherwise you're not gonna have any money at all. So I feel like that is such a resonated point. And this is the Sarah Jane Adventures. This is a show that's run by Russell T Davies, who loves his political allegories and his political storylines. So I feel like, this was I could feel that Russell T Davies would push Phil Ford into this kind of storyline. And Phil Ford, who has written many great stories for both Sarah Jane and Doctor Who, with Waters of Mars being one of the best episodes of Doctor Who, really just taking these themes, taking these ideas and running with them. And whilst that's going on, Skye really becomes the protagonist, in a sense, of she basically starts learning more of what's happening with Clyde, and sees that everybody's unreasonable. She even sees that she goes to Clyde's mother's house, and she can see that she has this unreasonable hatred for him as well, and she kind of clicks. She kind of gets this, so she gets Mr. Smith to scan Sarah Jane and Rani and make them realise that this aggression that they're having, it's from nowhere. It's coming from nowhere. Another political allegory of many homeless people. They come from, there's many reasons why people go homeless, but one main cause is people's reputation gets distorted, sometimes for reasons that they cannot even control, that they can't even handle. And I'm not too sure about this, but the fact that Clive is the main character of colour. I mean, Rani is sort of like a lighter skin, but Clive is a much more darker skin, and I feel like him being with this curse where everybody just for no reason hates him. I feel like there is something there about how racism can just affect anybody and makes you a lot more vulnerable to just start hating people for seemingly no and little reason. Of course, here it's to do to a Native American totem which puts a curse on him, and it feeds off that energy to try and break itself out of the totem prison. I'm trying to remember what the Native American god is called. Totem Come-To or something like that. And we have established that. But the story's main focus, its main narrative, is the relationship between Clive, who goes by the name Esdro Box, which the girl clearly doesn't believe. I can't remember her name, but it's not. We later learn it's not her real name, and they have this relationship, this bond. There's a moment as well where she's like, I dream one day of getting out of here. I've been dreaming for 2 years of getting out of here, maybe even renting myself a flat and just finding a nice boy to live with, and that might even be possible. And they kind of hug. We get to see her on when Clive's drawing on a napkin. He does a drawing of her, and she's like, "That's amazing." And they come up with this idea that they can be together. They can stick out. They can get themselves out of this dump by Clive drawing, being like a street drawer, going into the streets, paying people to draw them, and he does sketches of them. And she's like, "Oh, let's celebrate. I'll get us a coffee." And she kisses him on the lips, which I think is the first time in the series that one of the kids gets kissed like that. And you can clearly see that they emotionally really resonate with each other. So she goes off to get coffee, only for Ronnie and Sarah Jane, who have just broken their side of the curse, thanks to Sky basically forcing them to say Clyde Langer's name, and that basically cures them of this underwrite hatred. They find Clive and they're like, right, we've got to go, we've got to get to the totem. And Clive's like, no, wait, hold on, I need to wait for my friend, I need to wait for my mate. And they're like, there's no time, we need to go now, otherwise it could be the end of the world, we've got to go. And so Clive, he's kind of torn, but he's like, I'll come back for you, don't worry. And he runs off. They take it to the attic. The ending itself, I will admit, is kind of weak, where the totem is there and Clive's just like, I'm not afraid of you, you took my name, but it's mine, my name's Clive Langer, my name's Clive Langer. And it seems to just dissipate and the curse is lifted. And Clive reunites with his mother, who has broken the curse, and she hugs him, and it's just like, I'm sorry about that. But the story actually ends on such a low note, as Clive is just constantly, he's looking at all the homeless places that he's been to, all the places that he's been to with that girl, with that drawing, asking anybody, have they seen her? And at one point we learn that it wasn't her real name, she used a alias. And we also learn, she talks about something about a dragon as well, which magically takes you off in the thing. And we later learn she got that from a truck, which takes homeless people and gives them a new leases of life. And so Clive suspects, doesn't really know, but suspects that she's seen Clive run out on her, and she thought that Clive had just run off, had taken away and is gone and has forgotten about her. And so she's gone and taken this scheme by herself, probably making a better life for herself, in the vain hope of making a better life. Also, I don't know if anybody's picked up on this, but the fact that she didn't use her real name could be an implication that she was also cursed as well. And she actually knows about the curse, and that's why there's a relationship there. But I love how it's not actually stated here. It's not actually said. And the story just kind of ends on a sad note as Clive has to basically admit defeat, as he will never see his friend again. And Sarah Jane, Ronnie and Sky are just like, come on, let's go home. Let's just cheer ourselves up when we get home. I'm sure she'll be alright. And that is The Curse of Clyde Langer. Oh my god, this was amazing. This was easily a highlight of the Sarah Jane adventures. It's sad that it is the penultimate story of the series. It's really dark, it's really depressing. It tackles a much more adult theme than any Sarah Jane episode can. Any episode that focuses on Clive is a great episode. He's easily my favourite character, only second to Sarah Jane. He's my favourite of the kids. He has so many good stories dedicated solely towards him. And what's great about them is that they are standalone. You can, if you're interested in this story, just watch this one and you will be completely sorted. You don't need to watch like his starting episode and stuff. You can just jump into this and really enjoy the story. It's really great. And I also feel it gets heavily overlooked because it's from Series 5, and Series 5 has Sky and Next Story, and a lot of people, I presume, don't like the story. I find it really hard to believe that anybody hates this story. Maybe some people just thought it was okay, and just saw it off as just a Sarah Jane episode, but this was good. This is what Sarah Jane Adventures is all about. And there you go, that's the penultimate Sarah Jane Adventures, The Curse of Clyde Langer. So join me next time where we go back to K9 and his friends in 2050 in Tapathy and the Time Loop. So I'll see you then on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!